You're watching Business Nigeria. At independence in 1960, agriculture was Nigeria's economic mainstay. But the discovery and commercialization of crude oil soon transformed the nation's fortunes, making petroleum the dominant source of revenue. 6.5 decades later, Nigeria remains Africa's largest oil producer. Today, as the world pivots to cleaner energy, the challenge before Africa's biggest economy is urgent, diversifying beyond crude oil while reforming the sector to remain competitive. My guest is an energy lawyer and analyst, Dr. Ayodele Oni. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ayodele Oni.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So in talking about Nigeria's oil and gas industry, Nigeria's economy has often been criticized for being too dependent on oil. Now, in your own view, what are the key consequences of this over-reliance, and why has diversification been so difficult despite the country's vast resources?
Okay, it's historical. If you were doing something a bit tasking, like agriculture, and you suddenly find something that easily gives you income, it's a Dutch disease, right? Everyone is going to just jump on it and abandon those more difficult things, right? So that's what we've had with oil and gas. We had agriculture. You would hear stories about like other countries, Singapore and co, who were at our level, Malaysia, those who would come take our palm kernels and now sell more crude. The tragedy isn't even in relying on oil that much. The tragedy is more around not adding value to the oil, not refining it until now, not processing our gas until now, just selling the base resource and buying more expensive petroleum products. It's similar to what I was in Geneva. I was in Geneva 2 months ago, and if you see the chocolate wealth in Geneva compared to the poverty you'd find in a place like Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana, where they get the cocoa from, you know that it's really a tragedy in Africa, more so even West Africa, if historically we've just relied on base resources. Because, it's a balance of trade, balance of payment thing. You sell crude or whatever it is of 1 billion and you're buying back finished product of 1.2, 1.3 billion. It means you're in a deficit. You need to look for more money. That's why very often you find out that African countries, their budgets are in a deficit and they don't always have to borrow money. So I think those have historically been the challenges. It's not good news. It's not that much of a sad news to rely largely on oil, but are you adding value to that oil? Are you then exporting the finished products, which will still make you reasonably okay? And countries like Dubai have then invested in tourism, right? I said country, UAE as a country then looked at tourism, and a few other countries to have used oil wealth to develop other aspects of the economy. It's those things which we have not done that's the problem, more than even the reliance on oil.
Yes, those things that we have not done seems to be the problem because of the reliance of oil, as you have stated in your opening assertion. But looking at all of this, this over-reliance on oil has ensured that we have been severely affected by fluctuations in global oil prices. Now, how has this left us vulnerable to price shocks?
Oh, it would always leave you vulnerable to price shocks. Once you rely, it then mean you have a budget deficit. Because if you say, for example, that you want to be able to do 2 million and 6,000 barrels per day, and you expect that oil prices will be, say, 70 barrels or 120 $120 per barrel, and it goes to half of that price, you already have a budget deficit. If 90% of your forex is coming from there, over 50% of your revenue is also coming from there, it immediately becomes a problem, right? Because it means that you're going to derive less than half from what should provide you 50%. And those other things you can't really guarantee, right? So it leaves us vulnerable, leaves the economy vulnerable. You can wake up and something that, and there's a good example. If you read The Gentleman's book. I don't want to go into mentioning names and all of that. Oil prices changed, and it became broke, and it
Yeah.
became bankrupt. Whilst the ship the ship was laden with petroleum products. So that's what happens. So imagine that that's also a country.
Mm.
So those shocks just can get us very poor. See what's happening in countries like Indonesia. So yeah, over reliance just means that international vagaries, international issues just mean that you're in trouble,
Oh,
and even is worse as the world now transitions.
true. Transitions to tech. But what can we do? Have we as a country taken steps to go beyond oil? Like the president has been talking about agriculture, we're talking about now there's a new oil technology and all of that. Have we taken concrete steps to, or is it showing that the steps we are taking is actually pushing us towards non-oil sector and getting some revenue from there and moving us maybe like 60, 70% away from oil?
Yeah, I think it was worse, right? I think at some point it was 80% revenue, 90% forex. So if it's
Mm-hmm.
50%, it means that there are other things that have come to the fore. I think taxation, I have reservations with some provisions around the taxation anyway, around CGT and a few things that I think maybe would have put more thought into or more consideration. But that said, tax revenue, I think government is doing a bit more around that, encouraging the guys who are doing fintech, encouraging some of that. But you also need to be careful that some of the signals, even around the tax, don't end up scaring people elsewhere,
Mm.
right? The nomads and all of that. Because the world, like you said, data, tech is becoming the new oil. And I think that as a country, we're not doing that badly in terms of the individuals. I think government needs to do a lot around encouraging people in that space, right? Then you see a few non-oil around agriculture. You hear people say they are exporting certain agricultural products outside of the country and are generating revenue. Real estate is gone. Yeah, it's been good. I mean, there have been challenges recently because of fluctuation in forex, which is forex itself has been more stable in the last few months, but prior to that time. But overall, I think we've moved from 90, 80% oil, both forex and even revenue, to if you are doing 50%, it shows that we've made progress. And I think we're the only country in the world that relies largely on one or two items, to be honest. Our
Mm-hmm.
services too are great, right? Consultancies are doing well, whether it's legal consultancy, whether it's tax, whether it's a big four. You see, so the knowledge economy is something I also see that is driving the country. And even for the oil and gas, there's more emphasis on gas, which I think even with transition will still be the transition bus stop. And there are a lot of interesting presidential directives that encourage more people to do gas. But we also then need to be careful around implementation of some of these things, because Nigeria's problem usually isn't thought leadership or policies. It's when it comes to implementation. I think those are the issues. So I think that there's much more than oil. And to be honest, I tell people, and I was doing some math, we're not even as rich as we think we are for oil. When you do a per capita, when you do volumes divided by our population, it's probably two and a half barrels per year per person. It's not as great as we think. If we are doing 1,580,000 barrels, if we did
Okay.
that for last year and
Uh-huh.
divide the population about divided by 237 million to our population thereabout, and the 577 million we do a year barrels by that amount, you find out that we're not even doing up to 3 barrels per person. So we're not as oil rich as we even think, to be honest.
But now we are doing 1.8 million barrels.
Yeah, if you still do that, we're still not up to 4 barrels per person.
Mm-hmm.
If you divide it by 237 million people. So yeah, I was even using last year's numbers, because we're able to determine the entirety of last year, right? So in my own view, we've made progress. We are making progress. Look at telecoms, to look at IT, right? We're making progress. We have more people in the formal sector, micro, small, medium scale enterprises. But overall, there's still room for improvement.